In addition to a couple of major cards that we have going on, well, actually several major cards that we have going on, between the Sean Porter versus Andre Berto card on Showtime, the Oscar Valdez versus Miguel Mariaga card on in-demand pay-per-view in the U.S., Box Nation in the U.K., Tommy Langford versus Avtandil Kurtsids, and Zolani Tete versus Arthur Villanueva on Box Nation and BT Sports over in the UK. Martin Murray versus Gabriel Rosado on Sky Sports in the UK, and Arthur Abraham versus Robin Krasnicki on I think it's German pay-per-view. And actually, I think it might be on Integrated Sports in the U.S., interestingly enough. But in addition to all of those cards, on Sunday morning, ostensibly, at least Sunday morning for me, on the west coast of the United States, of course, but Sunday evening, there's going to be a big card in Osaka, Japan, featuring two world title fights. Headlining, I believe, is going to be Kazuto Ioka versus Noknoi Sitthiprasert for Ioka's WBA Flyweight Championship. And it's also going to be featuring Marlon Tapales versus Shohei Omori, a rematch, actually, of a fight that they had recently, where Tapales is going to be defending his WBO Bantamweight Championship. An interesting note about the Tapales' WBO Bantamweight Championship, apparently lately, in terms of the news that I've been hearing about Tapales, is that he actually might be having trouble making 118 pounds, which kind of speaks to the near future with regards to the fact that now Inoue may be potentially moving up to bantamweight at some time in the near future. And if Tapales winds up dropping his belt either in this fight or in a potential next fight, simply because of weight issues, not necessarily losing to Omori, I could very easily see Naoya Inoue wind up stepping up to the bantamweight division, considering the fact that he's been the super flyweight WBO champion for the past almost 2 years now, yeah, a little over 2 years now. And Tapales, should he vacate and Inoue moves up and pretty much grabs that belt by fighting a number one contender level opponent, it might actually just kind of turn out to be, in fatalistically speaking, a great match, not necessarily matchup, a great circumstance for Inoue to come across. Although this weekend, as I mentioned before, you got Arthur Villanueva versus Zolani Tete. Those two guys are the top two fighters ranked by the WBO. So if Inoue was to move up, he would wind up having to fight the winner of that fight, which is no easy task at all. Especially if the winner happens to be Tete. That's I think Tete was one of the guys that a lot of people that are in the know in terms of the lower weight classes knows that he would have been one of the best potential matchups, I think, for Inoue at 115 pounds. So that matchup may still happen in the near future, albeit at 118 as opposed to 115, which is nothing to underestimate in terms of its viability at 118, considering the fact that, Tete, as big as he is, fills out to 118 just fine, and I think Inoue most likely will as well, especially being as young and powerful as the man is. But getting back to the task at hand, though, with regards to this Sunday fight, Tapales versus Omori. As I kind of hinted at before, Tapales is a heavy favorite versus Omori. These two fought once previously, back in December of 2015, and Tapales pretty much lit Omori up. He caught him cold early, finished him in 2 rounds, TKO'd him. Omori pretty much wasn't even able to get his bearings under him. I think Omori is really the better technical boxer, but considering the fact that Tapales was able to catch him so early and he has that kind of leg up on him in the general sense, I would favor Tapales to beat him again, especially if he winds up not making weight and just rehydrates to whatever he decides to rehydrate to. As opposed to if he did come in weight trained, I would actually give Omori a better chance, simply because Tapales might not necessarily have that early start surge that he had in their first fight, in order to catch Omori and then finish him quickly before Omori's better technical abilities are able to take hold and lead him to outboxing Tapales down the stretch. In the main event, though, as I mentioned before, we got Kazuto Ioka versus Noknoi Sitthiprasert. aka Noknoi Sitthiprasert. Noknoi is a pretty good boxer. Fights generally behind a bit of a Philly show style defense. He's kind of a more of like a defensive counter-punching type of fighter. He has a really good right hand to the body, as a lot of fighters from Thailand tend to have. Good jab though. He's a lot more moderately paced, I think, than a lot of fighters from Thailand. A lot of the guys from Thailand tend to be a lot more high pressure, high volume, just like high action. Um, Sitthiprasert tends to be a bit more like calm, moderately paced, kind of going through the motions a little bit, being like very chilled out and very fluid, a lot more fluid than I think a lot of fighters. I think that owes to just the amount of experience that the guy has. He has 66 fights. Of course, he has the typical Thai record. He's got a lot of fights over relative scrubs and everything. But generally speaking, he looks like a pretty solid operator in the general sense. Doesn't necessarily have a ton of power though, and I think that the level of physicality isn't quite there for him insofar as being able to really put it on Kazuto Ioka the way that Ioka's kind of struggled with certain past opponents at 112 pounds. Ioka's a guy that, although he was really tall for the 105, 108 pound divisions, I don't necessarily think that he's like really a well-built, full, powerful, strong flyweight. The same way that he was at 105 and 108. Ioka is a guy that was able to pretty much change the course of a fight at 105 and 108 with a single shot, especially to the body. He doesn't necessarily have that at 112. He tends to break guys down over time. Just a solid boxer, solid all-around skills. Not necessarily the fastest guy in the world, but very, very solid technically. One of the better technical boxers, and as I mentioned before, a brutal body puncher. I definitely favor him over Sitthiprasert, but considering the odds are so wide for him, I think it's 25-1 last I checked. For him, there's probably if you can find a way to bet on the Sitthiprasert over Ioka, that it might not necessarily be the worst of chances, considering, as I mentioned before, Ioka has struggled a little bit more at flyweight as compared to the lower weight classes, simply because his overall physicality isn't quite there. Guys are able to take his shots a little bit better, and considering how good Sitthiprasert's defense is, and how much Ioka actually even struggled with another fighter from Thailand in his last fight, Yatana Kaensa, the 19-year-old prodigy, who managed to drop Ioka before Ioka came back and stopped him, broke him down and stopped him. So I wouldn't necessarily count Sitthiprasert completely out. If anything, I'd still say Ioka should deservingly be a favorite over Sitthiprasert, but not by as big of a margin as everybody has him. I think that Noknoi is, at the very least, a fairly legitimate challenge for Ioka. As a guy that I think can, in the skills department, not necessarily go completely tit for tat with him, but I think can hang with him in certain aspects, especially with regards to his ability to counterpunch and defend. I think Ioka really is going to have to be a little bit higher volume, throw a little bit more punches than he tends to, in order to be able to outbox and outwork somebody like a Noknoi, who's going to be looking to land, just big flashy punches, and he could potentially sway the judges with those flashy shots that he sometimes throws. He's not necessarily a high volume guy himself, but he has a little bit of that James Toney in him, where it's like he'll land a flush shot and he'll like almost do that little bit of pose. He has that little bit of bravado to him in terms of when he's landing his shots, and he's when he's up on his offense and he's into a solid rhythm. It can be really difficult to really dissuade him from keeping on pouring everything on you. But Ioka, I still favor over him. But as I mentioned before, Noknoi, I think, is a solid opponent, solid overall skill set. Not necessarily quite the elite of 112 pounds. I wouldn't put Noknoi there, not necessarily yet. I mean, if he beats Ioka, I'd put him there. Ioka, to me, is kind of almost by default the best flyweight in the world right now, since Gonzalez and Estrada left the division, as well as John Casimero. But I think that there is still a little bit of vulnerability to him at the flyweight division. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see Noknoi bring some of that out. That said, I still favor Ioka, and I'm almost going in circles in saying that. But I wanted to just make mention of these two fights. They're going to be aired on TBS in Japan. I'll try to leave a link in the description so that you guys can check it out. It's going to be coming on. I think the whole card starts at about 3 a.m. Pacific time currently, so that would be about 6 a.m. Eastern time in the U.S. and I think that's what about noon GMT. So for everybody in the UK and then everybody else around the world can kind of just adjust accordingly to the GMT times. But I'll put all the times, the details, etc. in the description box of this video. Hopefully you guys can check it out live, and then of course I'll do a review video with regards to both of these fights and the potential aspects for the future regarding both titles and whoever happens to win, as well as the losers of both of these fights as well, because I think they're fairly interesting fights, and the near future for these titles that are on the line, I think, have a lot of implications. So that's all I got for this one. I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.